friends are since.
Back when I was making a lot of music with Game Boys, I had this big idea that I wanted to do a music video just with the Game Boy camera, and I kind of looked into all the possible ways that I thought I might be able to do it, but unfortunately there was no easy way to get a clean or even like a dirty lo-fi video signal out of the Game Boys. There were a few prototype options of like VGA output mods and stuff like that, but there was nothing really that was readily available. And so recently I discovered this thing from Gamebox Systems, which is a kit where you take part of your Game Boy and it gives you an HDMI signal out. And obviously this seemed like my dream come true, so I did pre-order one. It took them a while to ship it out. I pre-ordered it back in May or something like that, and I just got it recently in September. To be fair, I think they had some issues with some of the build, but I finally got it, and my plan is that I'm going to build it in this video. If this does work, there's a few things that I'm really excited about trying out with it. First of all, I would like to finally make my Game Boy camera music video, but the other thing that is really cool is that I'll be able to now do videos using the Game Boy hardware hooked up to a screen, and I can show you different programs or just play live and have what's actually going on with the Game Boy displayed on the screen. So that's pretty exciting. Now, what you actually need to do this is an old kind of rear part of the Game Boy. So there are two kind of main PCBs within the Game Boy. There's the front one, which has the display on it, and then there's the rear one, which has got kind of the brains and stuff in there. Now, the front PCB is the one that often ends up damaged, and that's because if you're trying to backlight a Game Boy, it can be a wee bit fiddly and you can end up trashing the screen, and of course that means you're left with this PCB that's a bit useless. But thankfully this modification just takes the back PCB, and it just so happens that I have this old DMG lying around with a PCB that in theory I should be able to Frankenstein into this thing. So that's what I'm going to do, and hopefully I'll be able to do it without too much hassle, but if not, I mean, something's bound to fucking go wrong, so we'll see. This will be a grand unboxing. Oh, fuck, I'm clearly not the most delicate unboxer in the world. Free gift. The best. So what's this? Sweet, I guess. Oh, sticker. Bonbon, maybe? Maybe eating the bonbon while I'm on video was a mistake. Oh, so that's the case. So in theory, the way that this works is you put your rear DMG PCB into this case, you wire it up along with the PCB here, and then what you get is an HDMI output, which I guess goes there. You power this by 5 volts, there's the power switch, and essentially this becomes your Game Boy. Now obviously there's no screen then, so you have to rely on the HDMI output, which is fine, but you might be wondering how the fuck do you control this thing, and that's where the SNES port comes in. So you can essentially plug in a SNES controller. So it's not 100% you know, a kind of HDMI output from the Game Boy. It would be very nice if I could just plug an HDMI cable in here and still use it. However, this is kind of as good as we're going to be able to get from a commercial standpoint. So the first few steps are you have to remove the daughter boards from the PCB. You have to desolder them. Will I do it? Will I do it? If anybody's watching this and is going to attempt this project by themselves, then I don't recommend you follow my approach to this, because it will end up being fucked up somehow. Oh, have I taken that fucking... Ah, there we go. The next step is you have to desolder the battery terminals. So as you can see, I started to build out my consolizer there, and I'm not going to show you the full thing because there are other videos on YouTube that explain the build process in what I am sure is a much more informative manner, but it is relatively straightforward. It's not quite as simple as just taking the PCB out the Game Boy and sticking it in this case. You do have to do a wee bit of soldering, and the ribbon cables can be a wee bit fiddly, but it isn't too complicated. If you just follow the manual instructions, then you should be fine. But basically what you do is you take the rear PCB from your Game Boy, you install a wee jumper wire here, and if you want stereo audio, which you almost certainly do, then you would add another jumper wire here. That jumper wire then connects onto the PCB that you get with the Consolizer. This does all of the HDMI-fication. You connect your jumper wire together, so there's a really obvious solder point here. This gives you your stereo audio, and then all you do is connect up two of the components together. So you connect up your SNES port into here with a ribbon cable, and you connect up the display from your Game Boy into this using a big long ribbon cable thing. This is probably the trickiest bit because you have to fold this in a certain way so it all fits in and works correctly. But aside from that, it's fairly easy to do. However, I did run into a wee bit of trouble because it says in the manual that you'll probably have to sand down the edges of your PCB if you find that it doesn't fit in the case. And that's because, you know, there's differences in the manufacturing tolerances between the PCBs that were made by Nintendo and then the 3D printing process. But I found that my PCB just didn't fit in this case at all. Like, I spent 30 minutes clipping and sanding this thing down as much as I could without destroying the traces in it, but it just wouldn't fit at all. And I did eventually get it to fit, kind of, by jamming it in place, but I found that the volume wheel was sticking and it just didn't seem to fit right. And that kind of feeling was confirmed when I tried it with a cartridge, because the cartridge wouldn't fit in the slot. So clearly it's not just, you know, me, it is a problem with the case. So that's a wee bit disappointing. But I've been in touch with Gamebox Systems and they were very friendly and helpful. So they've said they're going to send me out a new case. But unfortunately, that does mean that this project is paused for now. Now, one thing to note though is that I did think there was a 3.5mm audio output on this thing, and it did say that on the website that you would have a 3.5mm output jack installed at the end. However, as you can probably tell from the case, there is no 3.5mm audio jack, and there's nothing on the PCB supplied that has space for that. And it turns out that the original description was a mistake, and that the audio, even though it's Pro Sound, so it bypasses the headphone amp, it does go through HDMI, and that's a wee bit of a pain because it means that if you want to use this for, you know, processing the audio, you're going to have to get one of those extractor boxes that takes the audio out of the HDMI, and it's just, you know, it's an extra step which you don't necessarily want to have to do. However, I have spoken to Gamebox Systems and we were talking about it, and you could just bypass the Consolizer audio completely and install a Pro Sound mod like you would normally. So take the audio on the ground from here, wire it into a 3.5mm jack, and then drill a wee hole in here, which could be a good option. So just be aware that if you're getting one of these things, that the HDMI is where you get the audio, unless you want to kind of do a wee bit of your own modification there. So aye. Thanks to the magic of television, we are a couple of weeks in the future. Unfortunately, I've now got a terrible flu, cold type thing. But on the bright side, I do have this package which came in from Gamebox Systems, and it includes this beautiful device here. This is a replacement for my dodgy HDMI Consolizer that I was trying to build before. And as you can see, they were even nice enough to send me a pre-built version that they had in their workshop.
I suspect that may well just have been to shut me up because they realised I was probably incompetent. But either way, it was quite nice of them. They didn't really know I was doing a video or anything like that, so got to give them respect for that. It is also this fetching gold colour, which I actually like better than the original grey, so that's cool. Anyway, they've built it for me, which means I don't have to go through the rigmarole again, and I'm going to hook it up and see if it works. But even just seeing it in its kind of final finished form, it actually is really quite nice, a wee unit. So let's plug it in and see if it does the trick. Okay, I've got this set up now on my very messy workbench, but hopefully you'll be able to see everything alright. I have the Consolizer plugged in via HDMI to my screen here, and I'm also splitting this HDMI output into my computer so I can capture the raw kind of signal and show you up here in case it's not very clear on the screen. Now I've got it plugged in via USB power, and then that's it. So what I need to do is first check the cartridge fits, because obviously that was the issue last time, and it does, which is good. There is a wee bit of travel there. It doesn't stick down completely kind of flat, as you can see, but hopefully that won't be a problem. The other thing I want to try with this is I want to use my wireless 8-bit DO, or 8-bit DO, I don't know how you say that, whatever the company's called. I want to use the wireless gamepad because these are amazing, and it's great to be able to sit on the couch or whatever with these. They feel really heavy and solid, just like original SNES controllers. So I want to try that, because sometimes when you see devices that say they're compatible with SNES or NES, they are not necessarily always strictly accurate when it comes to these kind of Wi-Fi Bluetooth things. Anyway, I've got a Bluetooth receiver here, and I'll plug that into the SNES port. It's a wee bit stiff actually, and it doesn't go all the way in like you might expect, but there we go. So I'll turn the power on and we'll hopefully see and hear something, and then my controller will also be able to connect. So I've got power now. Oh, I've got something on the screen. I'll turn on my gamepad controller, see if that connects. It's connected, so that's a good sign. So now I guess I just need to hit the power button and see. Hopefully we'll get audio as well. Oh yes, it's looking good. Test it out. I am no great player of Mario, so... Oh shit, there'll be no speedrunning here. Oh fuck. Oh, fuck it. Anyway, you get the idea. It actually seems to work quite nicely, and it all seems fine. It doesn't seem to have any... Yeah, it seems to work the way I would like it to. The next thing I want to test though is LSDJ, because that's really the main reason I bought one of these things. I want to see if it works with LSDJ. So I'm going to switch over the cartridge, and you can see when I turn it off it doesn't have a blank screen, which is a bit odd. It just stays with the last one. Yeah, it still fits in nice. It does have that kinda gap there again. It would be nice if that wasn't the case, because I don't know how much stress that's putting on either parts, but whatever. So let's turn it on. I've no idea what songs I've got on this. A proper tune. Yeah. Everything seems to run as I would expect, and it's also kinda as responsive as I would expect. I'm not really an expert in screen tear or anything like that, but I would, there isn't a noticeable lag, really. Nice, so that works as well. There's two other cartridges that I want to try it out with. First is the EverDrive, because the EverDrive can be a bit of a pain with power consumption and things like that. Should work fine, especially since we're running off of 5 volts, but I want to grab that and see. And I also then want to just try the Game Boy camera to see if it'll actually display anything. The final thing I want to check after that is the link port, but I'll talk about that in a wee moment. Alrighty, so I've got the EverDrive, which is, if you're not familiar with these are cartridges where you can load a whole bunch of different ROMs onto them. So we'll see if this works. This is one of the older ones. The newer ones, you can have multiple saves and blah de blah. This is one of the earlier ones where that was not possible. That fits in fine, loads up fine. Let's see if I get the screen. I might have to block out the audio on this one because I don't know if the Tetris audio is still... So the EverDrive works as well, which is quite nice, quite nice. The final thing I want to try is the Game Boy camera. Now, this one will be interesting because the refresh rate in the Game Boy camera is really slow. I'm not sure which way it'll fit in, actually. Hope it does fit in. Oh, there we go. It just seems to be backwards. Is that backwards? I think that's backwards. But anyway, it doesn't matter because with the Game Boy camera you can swivel it around. Now, this is a bit bulky. I don't know. Let's see. Turn it on. Cool. So, it's loading. Oh, getting something. Wonder if I can do video feedback. Oh, you can. Although it's kind of just wild. Huh. So it does work. It's just very, very slow in the refresh rate. Not bad. It's not quite as the picture quality is a bit shitter than I would have expected. I mean, I guess I don't know what I thought it would be like, but I'm sure I could do something with this. This is a kind of future project for me to mess about with. For my final test, I want to see how the link port works on this, because it's quite important to me as someone who uses the Arduino Boy with LSDJ that the link port actually functions as it should. And I can't think of any reason why it wouldn't, because it is still just the Game Boy PCB in there, but you never know, so let's give it a try and see. So plug in my Arduino. I've got this fetching ancient one that from many, many years ago. This is going to be plugged in to my Arturia key step here. And what I'm going to do is load up MGB, which is an application that lets you use the Game Boy sound chip as a synthesizer, a monophonic synthesizer. Interestingly enough, it was written and programmed by Trash80, who makes the Dirty Wave M8. So there you go. Nice bit of trivia for you. Plug it in, we're getting the screen. Here we are, MGB. And there we have it. Anyway, that looks good. Seems to be working. Superb. One other cool feature of this is that if you hold down the select and start buttons on your gamepad, even when the Game Boy itself isn't on, you get this menu here, and there's a bunch of options which mean you can kind of customize the display. For example, we can change the resolution, and so far I've just been recording in 480p, but I could up that to 720p, and you won't see much of a difference in the recording that I'm doing just now, but it does make quite a big difference when you're actually outputting this to a proper HDMI screen, etc. So that's something to be aware of, that if you're not getting the kind of display you want at this, you do have to go into the menu. Now you do have a bunch of other options. You can stretch the screen in different ways, which is quite nice, because sometimes you just want the proper actual dimensions of the Game Boy, but other times you want to stretch it out for the full sized thing. I'm not sure what TV is. I guess that's 4:3 maybe. I don't really know enough about the Game Boy aspect ratios to say. You've also got an overscan in here, which is nice because you can adjust it as you wish. This bit in particular is really cool. It lets you add scan lines in, which I guess I should turn on the Game Boy and show you that. But you can also change the border colour of the outside, and obviously that only applies if you have an actual border. If you're stretching it, you won't see it. But yeah, okay, we'll stick with orange because that suits me nicely. If we turn on the Game Boy, I've got Kirby's Magic Adventure in here. Turn it down a wee tad. Now that looks really cool. However, let's say I want to have some of the classic scan lines in there. I can add them in at different depths, which is pretty smart actually. The other thing you can do, which I really like, is obviously this is just the standard DMG colour palette, but in here you can change the colour palettes, and I'm not sure how many are in here, but let's take a look. And it actually makes it look really smart depending on the game you're playing, and of course the colour palette at the time. Let's try. I mean, that does look pretty fantastic. Even if you're doing stuff to upload online and show yourself playing games or whatever, being able to change the palette and have these visual options is a really nice touch. And I'm going to talk about the Super Game Boy on the SNES in a wee bit, but this is another kind of element of the HDMI Consolizer that makes it stand out from the Super Game Boy. The other bits in here, remap, I'm not entirely sure what that does. I suspect, I don't know. So I played about with it there, and the remap button does what it kind of suggests. It remaps the buttons on your controller to switch them around, which is quite handy if you're used to more modern consoles or maybe the PlayStation setup or something. Then you can switch the buttons round to your taste, and that's quite a nice wee feature. I've been playing about with the HDMI Consolizer quite a bit at this point, and I have to say that now it's all built and actually working, I'm actually really pleased with it. It gives you a nice clean HDMI signal out, comes in this wee pleasant form factor, and of course I've still got access to the all-important link port. Now there are a few things I should bring up at this point. Firstly, the audio quality, and you might have noticed in some of the earlier examples that there is quite a high level of noise, and this is for a variety of reasons. First of all, if you're familiar with the Game Boy at all, you know a certain level of noise is kind of to be expected because that's just part of the Game Boy, the way it works. Even with a Pro Sound modification in there, you do get a certain level of noise and hum. However, in the examples, there is a wee bit more noise than usual, and that's for two reasons. Firstly, I had the volume only turned up halfway, and when that happens, it means that relatively speaking, the noise is going to be louder in comparison to the sound or the signal you want, and you can reduce that by turning up the volume on the Game Boy, of course. However, the second thing is that because the Consolizer runs on USB power, whenever you run a Game Boy off of DC or off of USB power, you get this added interference and added noise, and for that reason, lots of chip musicians, whenever they're recording the Game Boy directly or playing live, won't run off of DC or USB power. They'll run off of batteries, and in this case we obviously don't have that option, which kinda is a bit of a limitation because it means we can't really remove the noise. However, I've discovered that if you get one of these USB isolators, which you can pick up for dead cheap on eBay or Amazon or whatever, this removes the added USB noise, and I didn't think this would work, but it does actually. So that's a good way if you want to use this for recording or for musical purposes, to just reduce that extra kinda The second thing to say is that I did try to convert this from HDMI to composite so that I could run it through my various analog distortion and video effects devices. Unfortunately, I did get some weird behaviour when I first tried it out. I had this kind of flickering thing that was going on. But I tried it with a few different HDMI to composite converters, and as it turns out, it seemed to be just that particular converter that didn't like something in the HDMI signal. So if you do get one of these and you want to use it for those purposes, then just be aware that some of the converters seem to have trouble with the kind of HDMI output that's there, and you might just have to try a few, and that's part and parcel of that kind of experimentation. If you are interested in using this purely for audio or purely for kind of analog video output, then you might want to consider one of the other devices that Gamebox Systems makes. I think it's called the DMTV, but it gives you a VGA output and it also gives you a separate audio output, which might be better depending on what you're wanting to use this for. But of course then you don't get the HDMI high def output, but it's something to consider. Now you might be wondering what the point in this thing is, if you can surely just take your Game Boy games and plug them into a Super Game Boy with the SNES, and there are a bunch of clear differences between the two. First of all, the SNES obviously doesn't have an HDMI output, but when you do use the Super Game Boy and the SNES, there's all sorts of wee borders and stuff that are added, so you don't get the full Game Boy in the screen like you do with this. And so the experience of using this is just much nicer visually. You get the actual full Game Boy screen without kind of any added fluff, unless you want the borders, of course, and then you can add in the colours in the menu. The other benefit that this has over the SNES, of course, is the fact that it runs on USB power, and so you can get a portable USB battery pack thing and you're not tied to the wall like you are with the Super Nintendo, and this means you can begin to get creative, especially if you're using the Game Boy camera, for example, to film things. And so I've got a few ideas that I'm going to try out. They wouldn't necessarily be quite as easy or as practical, shall we say, as if I was going to use them with a SNES. So that's it for now. That is the HDMI Consolizer. Gamebox Systems are just some wee tiny operation, and they do make all these interesting hacky devices, so I would encourage you to go have a look, because it's really nice to still see that people are making and creating innovative new things to help you get more out of your Game Boy. And if you are a chip musician, or if you're somebody that likes to perform live with Game Boys, for example, I think lots more people should be using these, because it means that we can then display what we're playing on the screen at the same time we're playing it, and I think that would give kind of much deeper or a different dynamic to live shows than just somebody standing up the front with their Game Boy in their hands. So I'm excited to see what I can do with this, and I've got a few ideas that I will share over the coming wee while. For now, that is all I have to say. Thank you for watching again. Goodbye.